Okay. There we go. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started right on time at 7. So just hang on. Very good. Okay. Well, let me start over. Welcome to the Utah Poetry Festival. This is the second of our headline readings featuring Stephen Peck, Chengru, and Rob Carney. I'm Lisa Bickmore, the Poet Laureate of Utah. The festival began as an initiative of my predecessor, Paisley Reckdahl, during her tenure as Poet Laureate of the state, and I'm very proud to be able to continue it. The festival would not be possible without the support, both logistical and financial, of Utah Humanities and the Division of Arts and Museums. Tonight, Case Johnston is facilitating the Zoom. Thank you, Case. As you know, the institutions that support and promote the arts and the humanities in our state and nationally are under severe strain and attack. So I urge you, as a citizen and as a lover and supporter of the literary and other arts, to contact your elected officials to tell them why experiences like this are important to you. I want to thank Nano Taggart, Laura Stott, Maureen Clark, and Melissa Salguero for their work in planning the festival. The lively panels that will happen tomorrow came about through their efforts, intelligence, and invention. A few housekeeping details. Your video and microphone are muted for the webinar, but you will be able to ask questions of our readers. You can do so by posting your questions in the Q&A. We'll try to save a little time at the end for our readers to answer questions. And please check out the virtual book fair and reading room at the festival website. Books and other materials by all of our participants are available there for you to peruse and purchase. And finally, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for being a vital part of the literary ecosystem of our state by making time for and showing up for poetry. Now, what I'm going to do is introduce all of our readers right now, and then they will read in the order that I introduce them. So when one reader is done, they will mute, and the next reader will begin. So I'm going to start by introducing Stephen Peck, who is an award-winning novelist, short story writer, and poet. He's also a working scientist who's published dozens of papers on evolutionary ecology and the philosophy of science. His worldwide studies of ecologies have given him a keen understanding of the dangers and troubles we face as a species and as individually embodied beings. He is an ecology professor at Brigham Young University. He recently began to formally study soundscapes, especially the songs of our avian friends. His latest collection of poetry, Experiments in the Fading Light, was just released and published by Signature Books. Chengru is a poet and translator from Shanghai. She is the author of a poetry collection, Moon, and a hybrid memoir, I Would Vanish into Its Stronger Existence, and is the Chinese translator of 2 books. A former EFL teacher, she is currently based in Salt Lake City, where she is a PhD candidate in English literature and creative writing and a Stephenson Cannon Fellow at the University of Utah. Finally, Rob Carney is the author of 8 previous books of poems, and his 9th, the Book of Drought was recently published by Texas Review Press. He's the recipient of a Milton Kessler Memorial Prize in Poetry, the Robinson Jeffers Torhouse Foundation Award for Poetry, and he's written a featured series called Old Roads, New Stories for the award-winning online journal Terrain.org for the last 9 years. Carney has read his work on National Public Radio, at conferences, festivals, and universities across the country. His favorite drink is coffee. His favorite animal is the great white. I'm going to start now by turning the screen over to Stephen.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's really an honor to be here. The first poem I'm going to read is called Additions to St. Hildegard's Physica. Hildegard von Bingen created this wonderful work called Physica, where she looks at what animals are in terms of the 12th century understanding of their relationship to humans, what they do, what they're good for. And so I will start with coyotes. Coyotes. When coyotes take holy orders, and all do, they take a vow to wander over the natural world. They are called to roam far and wide, visiting many climes to sample the ecosystems of the world in their variety and fullness. While solitary, they are not inclined to loneliness. They are tasked by their vocation to chronicle with their mind's eye the substances, shapes, and events of existence. This they take seriously. Such an undertaking requires a level of attention that does not lend itself to the contemplation of their isolated state. So enlarged, they are content in their seclusion. Many believe they gather in groups to sing their mournful, sharp, and wintry voiced whines to alleviate their friendless state, but this is not true. When a coyote dies, its ghost flies over the landscape until it finds a living member of its species and listens to its aria. If the eidolon is pleased, it attaches itself to the soloist for the remainder of the singer's mortal life. Thus, when a coyote howls, others nearby know it is presenting to a ghost, and they run in mass toward the sound, that they too might be considered for attachment by the spectral beast. A successful crooner may attract many ghosts to its retinue, sometimes as many as 10 or even 20. A coyote without an attached spirit feels incomplete, and others hold it in contempt. This is why dogs are so despised. They are always ghostless. Their love of science is well known. They are especially like humans in their love of nuanced tastes and in the Epicurean delight they take in sampling a selection of different flavors in their daily ration. Coyotes will, of course, take what they find. They are mendicant wanderers after all. Nevertheless, they have a refined palate and enjoy things they can first savor. It also must be remembered that these sage canids have a deep, inherent spirituality accorded in proportion to the number of apparitions they have been able to gather. This gives them power to perform miracles of a particular natural type, such as making the moon appear larger and more hallowed and brighter than usual. If you meet one at night under an enchanted moon, ask for a blessing. It will willingly grant your petition, allowing you ever after to hear the music of any coyotes attending shadow souls. The next one's entitled, If You Were a Tree. If you were a tree, you would be full of birds, not ordinary birds, although they would look so from the distance. They might favor grosbeaks or tanagers, perhaps juncos, or look like goldfinches, ravens, or even an osprey, who have dived there from some great height to nest among your branches. Some may imagine lyrebirds with their great tails hanging in splendor and charm, while others would claim to see toucans or smart Kia parrots that can speak many languages or mimic the songs of spirits, and fowl that hunt misty rainforests. Others would claim to glimpse avian shadows from villages in Tibet or Afghanistan, or the shores of the great rivers in places where oil water birds know how to dive deep for fish and snails. Other morsels that wander the benthos, bottom-dwelling multitudes slogging through earth's drying streams. Fewer would be sure they glimpse staggering penguins, curious and careful, unlike the steely sparrowhawks. There would be no large geese whose frank demeanor conditions them to fly unafraid over oceans of blue, cold ice, but makes them unable to grip a branch with felicity. The luckiest and most observant might think they see pine siskins singing joyfully in a conductorless choir, flashing yellow signals, soft-feathered warblers in your foliage. Yet I contend the birds that dwelt among your branches would be only those who learned wisdom in loneliness, unlikely birds that hunted questions and shunned answers, birds that whispered the universe's secrets in hushed calls and collected droplets of meaning by gathering up moonlight, cosmic strings, and unafraid to decorate your twigs and leaves with the fragments left over from the Big Bang, such that stars sensed through your adorned branches could be heard to score music that would break like waves on fractal shores, arranged in other worlds, birds singing despite Arios' emptiness, as if teaching the cosmos how to bow rebecs in grace-filled darkness. And like those careful birds that chose your tree, I would climb to the topmost branches and sway back and forth in the breeze, dwelling there, learning contentment and balance. I would hold on tight and aim not to be shaken loose easily by the winds that whisper and blow, because like the bright feathered denizens who dwell in your branches, there comes a willingness to be untethered, wild and unafraid to consort with waterfalls, carved glacial valleys and roofless porticos, yellow in the sunlight, and light stretched out along cloudy horizons of a gently reddening sky. The next one's sort of an experiment where I took two poetic themes and I smashed them together, like in the two-slit wave particle experiments. So this is kind of two poem themed put together. So this one's called Odyssey / Dover Beach, two-slit wave particle optical refraction experiment. Strange the wide Aegean can be so still, as quiet and placid as snow resting among the gaunt winter trees of a northern Hyperborean forest, hushed such that not even a moon-bright owl could attend to the whisper of wind sliding among both the needles and the patient upturned cones of ancient firs. Here, the night is summer, Mediterranean, sultry, chasing away memories of other climes and other campaigns. The Milky Way arches across the sky, and the argent crescent orb ignites a glowing path through Poseidon's dark domain. The too long becalmed war trireme rocks only to the motions of restless men shifting this way and that, fleeing familiar demons incarnated in their night images, as anxious in their shallow slumber as toothy dogs they twist on softwood planks, far from home. He stares out from the bow, awakened from an auguring dream by his thirst. The colors of night's sight are coalescing back to earthly day shades, but resisting, he wills hard the visionary hues back into remembrance. His dream was this. He was at home. Telemachus was there, a child again, no more than 8, yet dressed as if for war. In his right hand a small Dorian, his left arm an Espis, round and well made. He stands stiff in his breastplate and greaves of polished bronze. Upon his unbowed head a helm, but through narrow slits Odysseus can see the child's eyes wide, questioning, one eye filled with terror, the other hate. Both offer an accusation. And as the boy looks at his scarred father, he says something low and indiscernible. Yet even in one so young, untried, the voice is tinged with longing and woe, a fading sigh in hopes unrealized. Waking more, the dream mists vanish, and he looks over the glass-like sea and pulls his aging fists into his empty belly and swears by Zeus there must be more to life than war and blood and sorrow and the distant sound of pebbles grinding endlessly in the waves. So the next one's actually a poetic retelling pretty accurately of my mother as she was dying due to Alzheimer's. It's called My Mother Became Chatty at St. Mark's Hospital, and it didn't sound like the Alzheimer's talking. She awoke worried about a gathering. We would all be dressed nicely, because that's what Swedish people do, she smiled. We need lots of red things. Do we have enough red things? We do, Mom. I'll make sure. Swedes love red things. She stops to breathe in pure oxygen from a tube. Is Aunt Thelma alive? I don't think so. I don't know who's alive and who is dead anymore, but we must love each other. That's the way it always was. We loved each other. Both my grandmothers always loved each other. I give her a drink. There's so much to do. At the gathering, we will all love each other. That's the important thing. So this last one's a story about looking at the sunset caused by the California fires in Utah. In fact, it's called California Fires Feed Our Utah Sunset. And a note, all the birds mentioned in the first three stanzas describing the sunset's colors are extinct. Hand in hand, we agree it may be the most beautiful sunset we've ever seen. Both Carolina parakeet red auriculars and yellow nape are present in the scarlet overtones of low clouds as they bleed into the king's yellow that striates the sky. Foregrounding mountains emerge black as Hawaiian o'o coverts. The blazing orange clouds near the setting fiery orb descending capture light reflected from a Elise vermilion's flycatcher's breast, mixed with a tint of the bird's burnt sienna cap. No blue in the sky is visible, save near the westering sun. The Christmas sandpiper yellow-brown haze dominates both directly above and hugs the valley below in all directions, obscuring visibility. We wonder how the low stratocumulus lighting the sky for a moment escape the smoky roof that floods the valley like the taint of a cursed inheritance. Particles from the fire swirl through upper air, mixing and melting, colors quail, blending its hues as emulated memories, remnants of silent song, complex processes stripped of information, voids all meet in the upper air. In this, a roiling, noiseless assemblage of floating ash. I break on the thought, remembering singular specks of ash dust redirect a single photonic frequency from yellow to red. This bit from the body of a wren, this fleck from a Douglas fir, another from an orb-weaving spider, from a song sparrow or a ruby-crowned kinglet, a pine martin, this from a Steller's jay, a lodgepole pine, the list of sources for 100 million bodies sacrificed by fire, making up the haze, making the sunset goes on and on. The varied thrush, mountain kingsnake, western hemlock, red-shouldered hawk, Anna's swallowtail, butterfly, black oak, acorn woodpecker, chestnut black chickadee, red-bellied newt, Sitka spruce, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Each particle of the haze maps to an individual burnt to dust in an unforgiving sound, roaring flames. The number of species we have inhaled becomes too much. Watching the aesthetics of destruction in the setting sun, our hands untangled. A beautiful demise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That was a feast. Such an honor to be here. I'm going to read poems from this collection. The title is a combination of the English word moon and a Chinese character yue for moon. I'm going to start with the series of moonlight variations. It actually starts from the most famous Chinese poem, Jing Ye Si, The Quiet Night Thought by Li Bai. So if you know one Chinese poem, that's probably the poem. And I invite you to read the poem with me. 床前明月光，疑似地上霜。举头望明月，低头思故乡。Moonlight Variations. Li Bai's Moon 3. Moonlight falls upon a bed is like frost on the ground. I look up, the bright moon looks back. I lower my head, think of 故乡. To take out the moon, 2. To take the moon out of the line and replace it with an LED 3-color temperature lamp. To see your hometown on a 4K screen, review the poem with stars. To take out the moon 3. To take the yue out from its mother tongue and replace it with an alien sound and curves on a blank page to make the moon sound and repeat, and put a star beside it. To look for home. To make 2 circles with your hands and put them on your eyes. Report only the silver thing you see and call it HOME. To look for home 3. To move a roof and a pig from one land to another and place them by the thick large trees. To move a roof and a pig from Shanghai to Salt Lake City and place them in zip code 84102. To remove the tags from the luggage and place THE in front of the nouns. And to recite 静夜思 in mind, 床前明月光, and replace the moon in a luggage and a language. To invite the subject. The moonlight in front of the bed is like the frost on the ground. He, she, they look up the bright moon. He, she, they look down, thinking of his, her, and their hometown. How to invite the non-self from its non-existence to a land of identity politics? How to introduce the non-self who controls the verbs with no rules to endless pronouns? How to assign it a social security number, a permanent address, and a color? Choices one has to make when submitting herself, himself, themselves to the unknown. To reinvent the subject. The moonlight in front of the bed is like the frost on the ground. Look up the moon, look down, thinking of hometown. Who is looking up in a line, a cat, a tree, or the moon herself? Who looks up and sees her reflection, a missing subject at large, for over a century? Replace it with anybody who has the license to control the wheel and the desire to control the verbs. Order a coffee to go. Your relationship with the letters on a paper cup exists while the liquid lasts. Next, I'm gonna read a series of Jueju, which is a classical Chinese poetic form. It usually contains 4 lines. Every line has 5 to 7 characters. So there's a few different sections, and I will ring a bell between the sections, so I do not need to read the numbers. Postcard in Jueju. Like the Facebook reposts, the snow keeps falling into Liu Zongyuan's cold river. The fisherman disappears from the poem. Snow, solitude, their future phase, Chao. There was no future phase or tense for the white coming from the past or enjambment on Mr. Liu's lonely locust boat. Like one's beard, the lines exist on their shape, direction, limit. A voter, are you out of your mind? Balance and couplets receive odes, but a turn is an orange in a cherry orchard, shivering. Punctuations are aidants too, how water flows back and forth as time loosens its sense, past, present, future, timelessness. A deer from Tang Dynasty has lived, is living, will be living. A line is alive, is dead, was dead after the enter key. She who is read will become, has become me, is me. Who is the subject in this line? Whose brain is late for the night cruise? Whose moon is drunk and forgets about the light? I drink the spring, the night, the moon. My moon, my time, my embarrassed relationship with I. The speaker decides to put on a peacock feather hat and make appearance at 12. What a specific time. Imagine the speaker's voice, palms, eyes, the way she walks to fetch the moon in the river. Me, what is that golden yellow thing broken in the water? The speaker, Li Bai's loyal drinking buddy. You don't like the feather? The feather, my image-based cousin, Yue, where's your son? The moon, I am satisfied with the double fullness in my body, don't question. Now, a blossom should happen with a full moon. The moon and a petal elope to your mind. The poet is fishing the snow alone, 独钓, Hanjiang Xue. You and I are both strangers to the river. The one who retreats from the line offers you, my reader, a full jar of bubble gum, naturally flavored pun. Even the thinnest crescent has her full face coming even in this little 4-line jar. And I should probably mention that there is a reference in this series referring to the Tang Dynasty poet Liu Zongyuan's poem, in which there is a lonely fisherman who is fishing snow on the river. And the next 2 short poems were written in, I call them my pandemic letters to my grandmother. This whole book is dedicated to my grandmother. Jing Yi is her name. So I thought of her a lot when I moved to Salt Lake in 2021. And here's a cat poem because it made me happy, the neighborhood cats. Cat. All these poems, the two are addressing to my grandmother, by the way. Cat. Remember the orange tabby in your old house, who knocked on your door at 5 in the morning, came as he pleased, but never stayed. Back then, none of us knew about 宠物 or pet, about ownership of another life, about naming. We'd call every cat Mommy, watching them strolling in and out freely, napping in the sun. Soon, a one cat becomes two, give birth to small cats. The little paws grew big into no time, disappeared unannounced on a random day. Soon the first subway line started running. The old house was removed, you widowed. We have one blurred picture of the old house with the cat. I have forgotten our last hug as I stroll foreign streets searching. It's been too long that I haven't knocked on your door. I walk around and greet whomever I encounter along the way. A cat and her autumn. The next one is called The Sun. I want to tell you about the sun, but where should I start? Trying to describe something you see every day. I've had more salt than a rice you've had, you'd say. Something rises day after day in the same direction. In nursery rhymes and songs, in the eyes that look for the light. Never complains about the world it sees. Something bright, hot, glowing, but that could also be tender, red, caressing a brown leaf on a vine before it leaves. Is there anything new I can tell you about the world I see, the time I spend between new lands, new faces, old objects refreshed by new terms? Or it doesn't matter if I repeat myself after the same greetings, saying aloud, 太阳 again, or 太阳, closer to your native tone. That my voice hasn't changed is all you care about. That I hear you and we touch through hearing. That between us, the 54 years, the sun rises and falls, resets the color of a gloomy night, generous with its time, especially in the last lines. And I'm gonna end my reading with one short poem. It's called Four Kinds of Emptiness, which is a poem responding to my friend Lori Lane's oil painting a few years ago. Four kinds of emptiness, of which one is full, awaiting a virgin blossom to unbalance the abundance. The room is quiet, as if we are part of the plan, planted, pressed, bound, blessed. The empty receives attention. A leaf flutters, please, more light. In the shade of fear, Queen Anne's lace speaks. In time, the roots will grow. The empty is accurately placed, carefully touched by its shadow. We happen to agree on going back to the first day of imagination, where each leaf is light and empty is full. Thank you.
Is my mic on? Yes? Good job, Stephen. And anyway, everybody who's come, thank you for being here. The readers that I'm reading with, you for tuning in, Lisa and Case for setting it up. I appreciate it. I'm going to start. I'll just say, people who know me know this. I don't pretend to be an expert on the legal codes of New Zealand. But back in March, something happened there that keeps on running through my mind. Their House of Representatives, which must be a whole bunch different than ours, passed a bill giving human rights to the Wanganui River. How's that for treatment of a natural resource. Pretty good. And what I keep thinking, now that a river can claim personhood and dignity, is what do I want to suggest for human rights next? Probably stars. They deserve to be noticed. Once a month, we'll have darkness by decree. We'll have 12 new nights to look up, a dozen needed oases. And Puget Sound, of course, whether seen from a ferry or not, whether or not it's sundown on Seattle's million windows, so the skyline is mirroring gold, orange, rose, and red. And the Olympic Mountains are both in front of you and behind you, and seagulls ride rivers of updraft, and this time and place and wind should be vested with rights. The trees near Crescent City, too. They're older than Christianity. I'll call each redwood a cathedral, drinking fog, which truly is holy water. The snowmelt I drank in an ice cave, rights. Those ghost conversations of coyotes, rights. That soul-blown sound of a train at night, part love, part loss, and part Coltrane, couldn't be more human, with the human right to quiet, so that everyone who needs to hear can hear. And what about you? Isn't there a lakeshore somewhere, or a night in some December, or a time you saw some pronghorn and were doubly surprised, first by their nearness, then a second time by how they leapt away, too squat to be bounding like that? Isn't there a long-distance drive you've taken with a good enough reason at the end of it, or a view from the porch of a lightning storm coursing the sky? Anyway, it's April, soon to be summer in Utah, where most aren't yelling and opposed to helping refugees. Most don't think it's okay to zero them out, leave them trapped in their national horrors. In New Zealand, they've granted more rights than that to a river, which ought to be an elemental lesson. Here's hoping it flows all the way from there to DC. I think stories can help with that, at least if they're the right ones. And if they're not the right ones, then we can make up our own, which is something I did once. I've always thought, for instance, that the story of Eve in the garden and the myth of Pandora were just two redundant versions of blaming women for everything, which doesn't seem like a fair story at all. So I wrote my own to turn them on their heads. And I said it in the state of Washington because that's where I was born. And this is called In the Beginning Was a Girl. In the old songs about Washington, a girl woke up with feathers instead of hair, woke up with silver eyes and saw behind the moon, which was where the future tried to hide himself till it was time. The future liked his secrets, lifting each one up like an oyster, sometimes breaking one open to put in a pearl, sometimes to swallow it whole. And in the old songs, this meant the girl possessed a power, and that she'd be tempted, offered necklaces of moonstones, dresses of spun moonlight, the wild permission of wolf packs to run with them and hunt anything the future could think of to trade to get back his secrecy. But she refused. What she wanted was a moment, a single piece of him to press against her skin, to hold and grow in her body, and that was all. The future agreed to this bargain, which is how, according to the old songs, we were born. I have a new book out since last September called The Book of Drought, and I want to do some things from it. I should tell people, though, it is set in the West, but in the near future. So it is dystopian, set in a place very much like where we all live, set in a time that is on its way if we don't change. So these are two sections from the Book of Drought. Back when water was an element, hydrologists would measure things: the depth of the rivers, aridity of soil cores, the sorrow of glaciers as they faded, disappeared. They had inches and acre feet and flashes of level-headed anger. Remember when you used to go cliff jumping? My advice is don't. I'm saying they had numbers, stacked data. All I've got are buckets down a well. Just some language at the bottom if I'm lucky. Like maybe I could pull up another word for zero. Then some other words too, a whole sentence that sounds a bit like hope. They held a vote. I'm the one they elected to be the listener and reservoir and scribe, the one who records this. Say, the green of a hummingbird's feathers as it hovers, then the shapeshift purple when it moves. Say, the sound of a lake against a boat dock, like tucking in a child, or like slosh whenever wakes come rolling. Write it all, they tell me. So I fill up the margins. I can't be yet another thing that lets them down. But the past tense is everywhere. How long, for instance, since a hummingbird's been spotted? How long since we couldn't just walk across the lake? The bed of it cracked now, bed of it dust, dance partner of the wind if the wind were a cough. Nobody knows since we don't count back. All the seasons mean subtraction already. No snow in the winter months, feathering through lamplight. No rain in the spring months, and cold drops running down your shirt. It began with a shiver, she says. Like I knew this tulip was the last one I'd see in my yard. Not the cold outside, I had a jacket on, but that shiver, you know, when you're surprised. I kept looking at that flower, that red, so I wouldn't forget. He tells me the wind is what gets us, especially at night, with so many trees dead now. We think we hear the baby crying, but the baby's fine. There's just no leaves anymore. No leaves for that sway sound and rustle. When the wind cuts through, it makes a pitch the same as crying. Don't ask me yet about the animals. You're right, but don't ask about the animals. The world was the world, and beautiful, but lonely. Valleys divided the mountains, each from each. The sky had the sun and the moon and light connecting them. The ocean had tides joining in and out like song, two voices in harmony. No, only the mountains had to go through life apart. So the world sent clouds to be an answer. The clouds brought snow, a shared blanket through the winter, and the snow piled deep, a shared dream. And in the spring, as the days warmed, the mountains woke to find rivers, and those rivers braided the mountains into one. Back when water was an element, that story didn't need telling. Now when I do, I see sadness in some, or disbelief. Few of them talk to me. Words, like they're filling up a river. Words I've been picked to remember and pass on to you. The bones, of course. The bones, of course, make interesting litter. Cattle mostly, but sometimes coyotes too. Go 8 days without water, you're a camel. Do that as anything else, and you're a ghost, a voice leaving on the wind and rising away. The stars shine brighter now, with midnight blackouts mandatory. They switch off the grid to save water, what little there is, and too late for this bighorn sheep, for these ravens, a bleached white pair. A kid sends this letter to the future. Dear future, if I could, I would hand you this letter myself, but I don't know where I'll be I don't know where you'll be when I get there. My mom says it wasn't always like this with everything drought. That means no more water. We still have bathtubs and sinks, but nothing comes out. The faucets are empty. And we still have glasses in the cupboard, but mostly use canteens and you only take sips is all. If you already know that, I hope not. Not unless it's in a book. I like to read books, even sad ones, but maybe you're okay and you don't have asthma and don't have to hide on the dust cloud days. And maybe there's a swimming pool that's full, so you can jump in. And another wrote this letter to the past. Dear before, when I wasn't even born yet, how come you used up everything? I guess you weren't trying to be mean, but it isn't fair. I wish I could build a snowman instead of just be cold. We have a dog now because the man died who took care of her. She doesn't even cry when she's thirsty. She's a good dog. When I point to the sky and say, the clouds used to live there, she looks up too and wags her tail. And a woman just handed me a postcard with this on the back. Snow on Timpanogos, so you know how it looked when I was growing up. Love, Dad. And a girl sent this one to the governor. Dear Sir, were you actually serious when you told us we need to pray for rain? That isn't a plan of action or governing at all. I do not pray that I will graduate. I do the work, absurd as it is sometimes. Take, for example, 3 classes in science when adults like you ignore scientists. Or take civics, for example. I am still too young to vote, but I won't be next year. Sincerely. They asked me to record these things, to be the listener and reservoir and scribe, as if our letters and losses and stories are scattered bones. And maybe I can fit them together. So we still remember in these drought times. So we still imagine in these drought times. And so one day, if anyone finds this record, we'll seem whole, like we were people. Okay, so I'll end with one new poem called The House Painter's Story. And again, I'm really glad to have read with the two of you. And thank you to Lisa and Case for setting this up, and to all of the participants for being here. And hopefully people will come back for the panels tomorrow also. So this is The House Painter's Story. Since he works with invisible paint, he knows complaints are part of the bargain. They go outside to check the mail, and the house seems gone behind them. Or they park out front along the curb, and nothing's there. Just a view from the car to the garden. The house painter knows not everyone's a fan. Most come around, though, once they notice their walls are all sight lines. Once they see that their roofs are like sky again, nothing in the way. And now look, the mountains are returning, stepping closer to the edge of the city. And the buildings, those rectangle blinders, have disappeared. Thanks.
Thank you so much, all of you. What a gorgeous reading. I would just like to invite the audience. We have a few moments. You can go to the Q&A, and there it looks like maybe there's a thank you also much from Claire Hughes. If you would like to ask a question, and maybe I will start with one. As I was listening to you, I was thinking a lot about the work that you're doing with poetry as and embodiment, and like the embodiment of uh, of the natural world as well as of your perceptions of it. And I guess I was also thinking about the work that you do with the notion with witness, poetry as a kind of witness. And I guess I wanted you to talk just a little bit about what witnessing looks like to you as a poet, and if you see any likelihood of recovery in the act of writing poems or the act of your poems being read. And I hope that made sense. Any one of you could speak. How about we start with you, Stephen, if you have something.
Yeah, I do. That's such an intriguing question because I think a lot about embodiment and what that means. And I've been kind of working on a project about the embodiment of birds, what it means to be a living thing. And I've been working on a project that tries to dissect that a lot. And there's a lot of philosophers, in particular, a woman named Dupre in France, who believes that birds, for example, experience joy. And she's not being anthropomorphic. She's noticing their behavior and the things that they do to enjoy that. And so for me, um, I like Donna Haraway's notion of making kin with our creatures, to not separate us from them and to recognize them and us as fellow creatures on this planet. And I do think that poetry matters. I think that poetry expresses things that can't be expressed in science. I do a lot of science, and it turns the world into a quantitative entity that can be analyzed and dissected. But there's wholeness in ecologies that really can't be dissected like that are part of what it means to be a living being and part of a thriving ecosystem. And I'm concerned. I think all of the poems today from the other panelists were fantastic recognitions of this idea of witness and pointing out the meaning behind so many of the losses that we're experiencing worldwide. So I think being a witness with poetry captures things that science can't. I tell my students all the time that there's more truth in poetry than science. And they think I'm joking, but I'm not. I'm really serious about that. I think without science, without the humanities, science becomes quite meaningless, ethicless, becomes a source not of witness, but although it's important, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying it's not important, but I think poetry expresses meaning and the value of things much better. So I think that's a really good question that we should think about.
I like what Whitman says in his poem, When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. He's talking about being an attendee at a lecture with equations and proofs and facts, and it gives him a headache. And he leaves and he walks away and spends the rest of the night just looking up at the stars. Yeah, I think that literature exists to help us ask the right questions. I know science needs to answer questions, but I think that sometimes it's more important to be asking questions than having an answer. And stories are the way we connect with anything anyway. Even a physicist will try, not very well usually, a simile or an analogy to try and make sense of what it is they're doing in their field so that lay people such as myself can understand. I can't still understand, but um, I think even they know that they, in order to reach an audience, have to try to use imagery, things that appeal to us through our senses so that we can begin to apprehend it or care enough to try to apprehend it.
And
Maybe it's comprehend. One of those big words.
Chengru?
yeah, I'm just gonna translate witness into another word, attention. So I think poetry is such a important and fantastic vehicle for us to, give attention to whether it is nature or human experience, shared experience, or with language experiment, etc. It's my first time to read with Rob and Stephen, but there is coyote in both of your poems. And there's the moon in my poem and Stephen's poem, and now the moon is still with us, right? Also in Levi's poem. So everyone writes about the moon. It's a kind of shared human experience. So I'm thinking about witness and as a way of shared human experience.
Yeah.
I have one question that is from the audience. Dan Bigelow asks, do you have any tips for listening to poetry?
Is he addressing that to anybody in particular?
I think there was an open question.
Um, the same way that you would listen to the lines that were being told to you by the actors, enacted for you, inflected for you if you're at a play. The same way that you listen differently to a radio program, like maybe you're at home or you're driving and you're listening to NPR instead of TV. You got to listen not with earbuds in. You got to be, I think, leaning into it, like definitely attentive. Like I don't know. That's the way I listen anyway, and uh, it's hard if you're not paying attention. So you have to eliminate distractions, which is, oh, I don't know, a good thing to do, but something that we resist doing, I think, a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I think this idea Chengru mentioned about attention, and one of the ways that listening to poetry that helps me is actually to read it out loud. I love to read poetry, collect works, and by reading it out loud, I begin to identify the rhythms and the cadences and the meaning. And so I'm a big fan of reading out loud, even when I'm alone, so that I can capture the sound of that poetry. And then when I listen, it becomes more meaningful because I've attended to it in a certain way, and then I can capture that.
And I would just add very briefly, there's so much music and poetry, and
Yeah,
just listen again and again and again.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you. I want to thank you, Stephen, Chengru, and Rob, for your gorgeous words. I want to urge the audience to please go find these beautiful books, Experiments in Fading Light, Moon, and the Book of Drought, and others in the virtual book fair. And please register for and attend any and all of the rest of the Poetry Festival events, which you can find on the Poetry Festival website, utahpoetryfestival.wordpress.com. Thank you so much for being here, all of you, and thank you, our readers. I hope to see you again soon. Good night.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
Have a good night.